Have you ever gotten so stuck in a video game that you wish the game could just play that part itself? Well, Nintendo apparently thought so too, as this was actually a real feature that Nintendo developed called the Super Guide. It was kind of like having your very own Nintendo helpline counselor at your beck and call. Sounds pretty amazing, right? And at the time, it seemed like this was going to be a major pillar for Nintendo moving forward, until it seemingly evaporated into thin air. So what happened? Where did the Super Guides go? Well, it's time to cast a searchlight on this forgotten feature and take a closer look at exactly what it was, how it was used, and why it's gone missing. Welcome to Missing in Action, where we take a look back at various game elements that have mysteriously gone missing. First, we need to go all the way back to early 2009, when we got our first hint at a mysterious new feature via a patent filed by Nintendo and Shigeru Miyamoto himself. It outlined 3 ways to experience a game. Game, where the player plays the game as normal, but can view hint videos if they get stuck. Digest, where the player can watch a video of the game developers playing the game, and with the press of a button, jump into that exact moment from the video. And finally, Scene Menu, where the player can skip directly to a specific scene of the game to play at any point, without having to load a save or watch the video. This last pillar never really comes to fruition in the games, but the first 2 may just be what defined the Super Guide itself. Of course, this patent was noteworthy for how it could impact Nintendo's design philosophies. The idea of watching someone else's gameplay up to a certain point, then jumping in at that exact spot, was practically unheard of. Kotaku wrote an entire article about the patent, and even went to ask Miyamoto himself about it during an interview at E3 later that same year. Although he didn't have much to offer, only saying after a lengthy exchange with his translator that they were surprised that anyone looked at the patents, and he teased that people should keep an eye on how the game deals with players getting stuck. And we wouldn't have to wait too long to find that out, because the Super Guide was first officially introduced later that same year in New Super Mario Bros. Wii, and it was even shown off to Kotaku in an early preview. So it was clearly a feature Nintendo was looking to show off. The Super Guide followed through on the first 2 of the patent's 3 pillars. First, players could spend star coins in Peach's castle to watch hint movies. These were videos that players could watch showing how to complete levels, where to find star coins and secret exits, and more. It was like having access to your own YouTube walkthrough from directly within the game itself. But more impressive is the second pillar, the Super Guide block, which is something that would only appear after the player lost 8 lives in the same level. Hitting the block began an autopilot run through the level, starring as Luigi. As the patent outlined, the player could resume control at any point, giving them control of Luigi for the level. It's essentially a replay of a developer's run through the level, like a time trial ghost. But unlike time trial ghosts, the player could take control with the press of a button and keep playing from there. In effect, it was basically an instant win button, but only when you needed it most. And even then, it was entirely optional. But there is a catch, because by having the Super Guide block appear, players would never be able to gain the shiny stars on their save file, even if the Super Guide block wasn't actually used, making a 100% completion run impossible without starting a new file, which is an unusually harsh punishment for players who might just be having some difficulties with their platforming, especially if they didn't even use the feature. Even worse, the game provided no warning of this either. That aside, the Super Guide was still ultimately a good thing. It aimed to help players struggling to get through the game in a more interactive way. It was likely pretty helpful for younger players too. The Super Guide next appeared in Super Mario Galaxy 2 the following year, though it underwent a slight rebranding. Rather than paying for hint movies, the players will find the tip network instead, via a series of small TVs scattered about, just before difficult portions in a level. Like with the hint movies, they showcase a short video of how to progress through a difficult section. Furthermore, the Super Guide block has been replaced by the Cosmic Spirit. Taking a similar form to Rosalina, she would appear whenever the player lost enough lives in specific levels, the exact number ranging from 5 to 12 depending on the level. When spoken to, she offers the player the ability to activate the Cosmic Guide, which has the spirit possess Mario and guide him through the level. As with the Super Guide block, the player can regain control with the press of a button at any point. However, by activating the Cosmic Guide, the Power Star you'd find at the end changes to a Bronze Star. And although it still counts as completing the level, the proper Power Star must still be collected in order to unlock the game's final challenge, the Grandmaster Galaxy. Thankfully, unlike New Super Mario Bros. Wii, players are not locked out of a 100% save file, since they can simply replay the level without activating the Cosmic Guide in order to obtain the normal Power Star. Phew. The Super Guide returned later that same year, but this time back in the 2D platformer space with Mario vs. Donkey Kong Mini Land Mayhem. But it went under another rebrand, this time called the Mini Guide, and brought with it a few changes. Because from this point on, the Super Guide would lose one of its core pillars outlined in the patent, being the digestible hint videos, which simply disappeared. But the idea of the Super Guide block mechanic continued to live on, albeit in a more limited fashion. This time, the mini guide option appeared in the menu whenever you lost at least 5 lives in a single level, and like before, it would allow you to have the level autoplay itself. But unlike the previous instances, the player can't take back control, making it more of a long-winded way of skipping past any particular level. This also means the level won't save a score until the player finishes it for themselves. Not long after, the Super Guide appeared yet again in Donkey Kong Country Returns, along with its eventual 3DS port. This time, whenever the player lost 5 lives in a level, the tutorial pig appeared and offered to enable the Super Guide. When activated, the Super Kong appears, which basically looks like a white furred Donkey Kong. He's even got a unique silhouette with that blue tie. And no, it's not Donkey Kong's answer to Supersonic. Anyway, Super Kong would play through the level for the player, and just as with the Galaxy 2's Cosmic Spirit or New Super Mario Bros. Wii's Super Guide, the player can once again resume control at any point with the press of a button. But as you might expect, the player doesn't get to keep any items that Super Kong collects, even if they took back control, meaning players would still need to replay the level on their own for any collectibles. After Donkey Kong Country Returns, it would be almost exactly 2 years before the Super Guide appeared again, but this time back in its original Super Guide block form in New Super Mario Bros. U. And besides the missing hint videos, it functioned almost identically to how it did back in New Super Mario Bros. Wii, only with it following the recent trend of it appearing after losing at least 5 lives instead of 8. It still auto-played the level on your behalf, with the player still able to take back control with the press of a button. And mercifully, the block's mere appearance no longer locks the player from a 100% completed save file, though you would still lose the shiny stars on the save file if you used the block. From this point, outside of the Switch port of New Super Mario Bros. U, the Super Guide completely disappears, both as a brand, but also the idea of letting the game play itself. However, there's an interesting wrinkle to this, as around the same time, Nintendo effectively introduced a spin-off idea to the Super Guide block, called the Assist block, and it appeared in the same way, after losing 5 lives in a single level. But rather than directly guiding the player, the Assist block instead powered them up with a special item to help give them the boost they need, while letting them remain in full control and, actually play the game. It actually first appeared in 2011's Super Mario 3D Land, a full year before the Super Guide's final new appearance. Here, it bestowed Mario with the white Tanuki suit, which not only granted him the powers of the Tanuki suit like floating and attacking, but also made him invincible, and lasted the remainder of the level. And get this, if the player still couldn't manage it, another special block would appear after losing 10 lives, called the P-Wing Assist block, which directly teleported Mario to the end of the level. Which, when you think about it, is basically just a Super Guide block, but without having to watch the gameplay itself. And unfortunately, if an assist block appeared in 3D Land, it's just as punishing as New Super Mario Bros. Wii. Players lost the shine on their save file permanently if it appeared, even if it didn't get used. The assist block reappeared in 2012's New Super Mario Bros. 2, granting Mario the white raccoon suit after losing 5 lives, which, like the white Tanuki suit, has all the powers of the raccoon suit plus invincibility. Unlike in 3D Land, however, if the assist block is used, simply replaying the level and not using it would restore any penalties, such as the shine on the save file stars. This marked the only time the assist block appeared in the New Super Mario Bros. Series, and it's a bit odd. It released between both Wii and U, both of which used the Super Guide block. So why didn't this game also use the Super Guide? Well, we may have an answer. Both 3D Land and New Super Mario Bros. 2 were handheld games, so maybe Nintendo wanted to ensure players would actually keep playing the game, especially since handheld time is likely more limited and meant to be in quick bursts, instead of, fussing around with the Super Guide menus. The final appearance of the assist block was in 2013's Super Mario 3D World, once again granting the invincible white Tanuki suit to the players. But for the first time, it actually worked in multiplayer as well, though the exact criteria changed depending on the number of players. In single player, it showed up after 5 lives lost in a single level. In multiplayer, it takes 12 lives for 2 players, 18 lives for 3 players, and 24 lives for a full set of 4 players. And as usual, the score would not be saved on a level that uses the assist block. Interestingly, while the assist block reappeared in the Switch port of 3D World, it only reappeared in the 3D World half, and skipped the Bowser's Fury portion, perhaps another nail in its coffin. Which means that the Super Guide feature and similar ideas like the assist block completely vanished from new games after 2013. So outside of any ported games, the Super Guide and assist blocks had relatively short lifespans, existing only between 2009 and 2013. That's only 4 years. And it's not like there haven't been plenty of opportunities for it to have reappeared either, especially as it already spanned 2D Mario, 3D Mario, spin-offs, and even a 2D Donkey Kong game. Surely there's more it could have been in. Like Donkey Kong Country Return's direct sequel, Tropical Freeze, which didn't see the return of Super Kong. Heck, the game didn't even feature any sort of easy or guide mode. It was marketed as a difficult game, and Nintendo held on to that. Until the Switch port, that is. This version added the new Funky mode, allowing players to tackle the adventures as Funky Kong, who was an overall easier character to play than DK and the rest of the crew, thanks to a much more forgiving double jump and being immune to some damage. Mario's next 3D outing, Super Mario Odyssey, didn't feature any sort of Super Guide-like feature either, with no assist blocks, cosmic spirits, or tip network to be found. Although, it did have what could be considered an evolution of the idea called Assist Mode, which could be turned on anytime from the menu. It gave Mario more health, prevented him from drowning or dying in pits, and arrow icons would even guide Mario through the story mode, pointing out exactly where he needed to go in order to progress the story. While the Assist Mode is certainly similar in the sense that it's a system meant to help players, in execution, it's actually more of an easy mode that could be toggled on at any time, rather than a help mechanic that would only appear after the player made too many mistakes. It does make sense for an open world style game though, where it would be nearly impossible to track if the player kept dying when attempting the same challenge or not. As a port, the Super Guide technically returned in 2019's New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, but this time it was augmented with a new feature that might offer a hint as to the future of Nintendo's in-game help, because this version of the game introduced 2 new playable characters for the first time ever, being Toadette and Nabbit, with them being clearly marked as easier and easiest, respectively. Toadette because of her exclusive brand new power-up, the Super Crown, which turns her into a weird version of Peach called Peachette. Look, it's best not to think about it too much.
Whoa.
This form gave her additional abilities, like a higher jump, a double jump, a float jump, and a free boost out of lava or death pits, whereas Nabbit was immune to any enemy damage. So now, even the 2D Mario games were introducing the idea of easy mode, or easier and easiest modes to be precise. It actually feels like an evolution of the new Funky mode in Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, only now allowing you to swap characters pretty much whenever, rather than relegating that enhanced character to its own dedicated mode. Most recently, the Super Guide was also missing from Mario's grand return to 2D after a 10-year gap with 2023's Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Instead, like New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, it relegated the easier options to a handful of selectable characters, being Yoshi's and Nabbit in this case, who take no damage at the cost of not being able to use power-ups. And since the player could freely swap to or choose from these characters at any point, there was no punishment for using them. So clearly, Mario's given up on the idea of the Super Guide, but that's not even to touch upon the other Nintendo platformers the Super Guide could have appeared in, but didn't either, like 2015's Yoshi's Woolly World, and 2019's Yoshi's Crafted World, both of which featured a toggleable easy mode option in the menu called Mellow Mode, which granted Yoshi extra health and more egg ammo, along with the power of flight. Furthermore, in the 3DS version of Yoshi's Woolly World released later, it added the Poochie Pups to help Yoshi find hidden secrets too. And in Yoshi's Crafted World, it had the Flower Tracker, to help the player find collectibles more easily. None of these features here really resembled the Super Guide, and were instead the now much more common Easy Mode. Kirby is another Nintendo series that eventually adopted the Easy Mode ethos, rather than anything resembling the Super Guide. 2022's Kirby in the Forgotten Land had a toggleable Spring Breeze mode, which granted Kirby more health while making enemies easier to defeat. And 2023's Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe had the Helper Magolor mode, which served as an easy mode for the story where players were given more health, and Magolor would appear to give healing items and abilities to players, while also catching players if they fell into a pit. Like the Spring Breeze mode, the Helper Magolor could be turned off at any time in the menu, and it didn't punish the player for using it. The only other Nintendo platforming series that arguably could have introduced something akin to the Super Guide is Metroid, and the closest we've gotten is with the Rookie mode in 2021's Metroid Dread. And it's essentially an easy mode in all but name, giving Samus more health, more missiles, and reducing damage dealt by bosses. But beyond that, it doesn't really assist the player in any way. Though, interestingly, the game didn't actually launch with it, as it was added after the fact in a free update. At this point, given that we haven't seen the Super Guide or assist blocks outside of ports in a good 10 years, it seems clear that the very idea behind them has been abandoned, with Nintendo instead replacing them with the much more common Easy Mode, either in the form of a toggleable menu option or optimal characters with enhanced stats. But all of this begs the question, why the change? After all, the Super Guide was a feature Nintendo clearly seemed proud of, going so far as to patent it, before giving Kotaku an early preview of the feature. Well, we have some theories. 1. A menu option, whether it be a toggle or a character, is just a much clearer and more accessible way of offering help. It gives the player full control of if and when the game is easier, without hiding it behind somewhat arbitrary death counts and repetitive failures. 2. It's less patronizing for the player. With the Super Guide, the mere appearance of the Super Guide or assist blocks was almost like the game saying, "Hey, you're clearly struggling. Do you need help?" It was like a badge of shame, especially in the cases where it actively punished the player, forever locking them out of a 100%ed file. Third is that it may have just been an overly complicated solution to a simple problem. The idea of the Super Guide was noble, help the player out of a jam only when they needed it. It was designed to get the player back into the action and actually playing the game. But Nintendo may have realized it's just better to give the player the tools they need to always keep playing, whether by lowering the difficulty, or by giving them access to special characters that allow for an easier experience when desired. Especially in an era when video game walkthroughs and tip guides are just a few phone taps away, which really wasn't the case back in 2009. And given this trend, and how prominent easy modes are in general, it seems likely we may never see the Super Guide again in the future, outside of any ports and remasters. Still, it was at the least an interesting concept, and one that even Nintendo's competitors may have realized was a good idea, as Microsoft issued their own patent for a Super Guide of their own shortly after Nintendo's in 2009. Granted, that one never came to fruition. But we can't help but wonder if the Super Guide helped lay the groundwork for Sony's more recent inclusion of in-game help as part of the PlayStation 5's operating system. In any case, even if the Super Guide may be gone and forgotten, the spirit of it lives on through Nintendo's more inclusive efforts in recent years, with more accessible assist features than ever before, especially compared to the days before the Super Guide. And in that respect, the Super Guide was a massive success, because players of any skill level could keep playing the game, thanks to the help of various assist features. But what do you guys think? Could the Super Guide ever make a proper comeback? Would you have liked to see it in any games over the last decade? And is there anything or anyone else that's gone missing that you want found? Let us know down in the comments below, and maybe we'll cover it in a future episode. Thank you all for watching, and make sure to stay tuned to GameXplain for future Missing in Action episodes, and plenty more on gaming as well. Until next time, farewell.